The morning sunlight filtered through the crowded city bus, its warm rays a stark contrast to the tired faces of passengers packed shoulder to shoulder. It was one of those typical weekday commutes, silent but chaotic, with people scrolling through their phones, clutching coffee cups, or simply staring out the window, lost in thought. Among them was Alex, a young man in his late 20s, dressed neatly in a button-up shirt and jeans, his leather briefcase perched on his lap. Alex was the kind of person who blended into the crowd, unassuming yet quietly observant. The bus jerked to a halt at the next stop, and a flurry of movement filled the aisle as more passengers boarded. Among them was a woman who immediately caught Alex's attention. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, a round belly unmistakably signaling that she was pregnant. She looked exhausted, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, and her eyes scanning the crowded bus for an empty seat. But there wasn't one. Alex felt a pang of guilt as he glanced around, noticing how others averted their eyes, pretending not to see her. Without a second thought, he stood up and gestured toward his seat. "Here, ma'am. Please have my seat," he said warmly, offering her a reassuring smile. The woman hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by his gesture. "Oh, thank you so much," she said, her voice carrying a mix of gratitude and relief. As she eased into the seat, she glanced up at Alex. "You're very kind. Most people don't even bother these days." Alex shrugged modestly. "It's no big deal. You looked like you needed it more than I did." The bus lurched forward, and Alex grabbed a nearby pole to steady himself, now standing amid the throng of passengers. The woman gave him a grateful nod and leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment as if savoring the brief reprieve. But then something unusual happened. Alex noticed her glance up at him again, this time with a strange expression, as though she were studying him intently. There was something in her gaze, an odd mix of curiosity, hesitation, and perhaps even recognition, that unsettled him. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the bus. Alex leaned in slightly to hear her better. Do I know you?" Her question took him by surprise. He furrowed his brow, searching her face for any signs of familiarity, but nothing clicked. "I don't think so," he replied, shaking his head. "Why do you ask?" The woman hesitated, biting her lip, as if debating whether to say more. Finally, she sighed and gave a small, almost nervous laugh. "Never mind. It's probably nothing. I've just been a little forgetful lately." Alex smiled politely, though her reaction left him curious. He chalked it up to pregnancy brain, a term he'd heard his sister use during her own pregnancy, and decided not to press her further. But as the bus continued its journey, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her question than she'd let on. A few minutes later, the bus approached another stop, and the woman suddenly stood up, clutching her bag. "This is me," she said hurriedly, offering Alex a brief but meaningful look. "Thank you again for your kindness." Before Alex could respond, she stepped off the bus and disappeared into the crowd. He watched her go, a faint sense of unease settling over him. Something about the entire interaction felt off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Little did Alex know, this seemingly ordinary moment of kindness would set off a chain of events that would turn his life upside down. And whatever the woman had been holding back, whatever she had almost told him, was just the beginning of a mystery he never saw coming. Alex couldn't shake the strange feeling that lingered after the woman left. The rest of his bus ride passed uneventfully, but her words and the intensity of her gaze stayed with him. Was it really possible she'd recognized him? From where? He replayed the brief interaction in his mind, trying to make sense of it. The city was vast, filled with strangers crossing paths every day. Maybe it was just a coincidence, a passing moment of confusion. By the time Alex stepped off the bus and made his way to the office, he had almost convinced himself it wasn't worth dwelling on. The buzz of the workday quickly took over, his inbox flooded with emails and back-to-back meetings. But every so often, his thoughts drifted back to that fleeting exchange. The look in her eyes had been so peculiar, almost as if she wanted to say more but held herself back. Later that evening, as he walked home, Alex couldn't resist mentioning the encounter to his roommate and best friend Marcus. Marcus was the type of person who thrived on intrigue, always looking for hidden meanings in the mundane. "I don't know the full story," she admitted, her expression pained. "I left that job months ago, and I've tried to put it behind me. But when I saw you on the bus, I recognized you instantly. And I couldn't stop wondering if it was some kind of sign." Alex's mind raced, his thoughts spiraling in every direction. He didn't have anything to hide, at least he didn't think so. His life was ordinary, almost painfully so. Why would anyone have a file on him? "Are you sure it was me?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. The woman nodded firmly. "I'm positive. I remember your face, your name. It was you." The air between them grew heavy with silence, the weight of her words sinking in. Alex searched her eyes for any hint of dishonesty, but all he saw was genuine concern, and maybe even guilt. "Why are you telling me this now?" he finally asked. She hesitated again, her hands resting protectively on her stomach. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. I don't know what it means, or if it even matters anymore. But I thought you should know." Alex didn't know how to respond. 1,000 questions clamored for his attention, but none of them felt like the right one to ask. The woman glanced at her watch and stood up, her movements rushed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I have to go, but please be careful. Sometimes things aren't as simple as they seem." Before Alex could stop her, she was gone, leaving him alone at the table with more questions than answers. As he sat there, staring out the window at the bustling street, one thing became painfully clear. His life was no longer ordinary, and whatever lay ahead was only just beginning. The cafe felt strangely quiet after she left, even though the hum of conversations and clinking cups continued around Alex. He sat there for what felt like hours, trying to piece together the puzzle she had dropped in his lap. A file of his photo. An organization dealing with sensitive information. The more he thought about it, the less it made sense. He wasn't anyone important. He had no skeletons in his closet, no dark past lurking in the shadows, so why him? As Alex finally stood and left the cafe, his mind buzzed with questions he couldn't answer. The streetlights flickered on as the city transitioned into its usual evening bustle. But he hardly noticed. His feet carried him home automatically, though his thoughts were elsewhere. When he walked through the door, Marcus was sprawled on the couch, a game controller in his hands, and a bag of chips balanced precariously on the armrest. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Marcus remarked, pausing his game and giving Alex a curious look. What happened? Alex dropped his bag on the floor and sank into the chair opposite him. "I saw her again, the woman from the bus." Marcus's eyes lit up. No way. Did she explain what her deal was? Alex hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "She said she recognized me. Apparently, my photo was in some kind of file from her old job." Marcus frowned, leaning forward. What kind of file? She didn't say much, just that it was private and had sensitive information. She didn't know why my name or face was in there, but she seemed serious. Marcus let out a low whistle. "Man, that's weird. Are you sure she's not messing with you?" "I don't think so. She seemed scared, like she was taking a risk just telling me." Marcus considered this, his usually playful expression replaced by one of rare seriousness. "Okay, but think about it. What could someone possibly want with you? No offense, but you're just a regular guy." "Exactly," Alex said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "That's what I don't get. There's nothing about my life that would warrant a file or whatever she's talking about." "Maybe it's a mistake," Marcus suggested, though even he didn't sound convinced. "Maybe," Alex replied, though deep down he doubted it. The woman's urgency and the way she looked at him didn't feel like a mistake. It felt intentional. "So, let me get this straight," Marcus said, leaning back on the couch with a half-eaten slice of pizza in his hand. "You gave up your seat," she acted all mysterious, "and now you think it's some kind of big deal? Maybe she just thought you looked like someone she knew. Happens all the time." Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know how it sounds, and I get it. It's probably nothing. But the way she looked at me, it was weird. Like she was about to say something important, but stopped herself. Maybe she's a secret agent, and you're caught up in some kind of spy drama, Marcus teased, wiggling his eyebrows. Thanks for taking this seriously, Alex replied with a smirk, though part of him wished he could laugh it off as easily as Marcus did. That night, as Alex lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind refused to settle. He couldn't explain why the encounter had left such a strong impression, but the unease wouldn't let go. He didn't even know her name, yet it felt like she had brought something into his life, a question that demanded answers. The following morning, Alex took the same bus at the same time, his eyes scanning the crowd at every stop. He wasn't sure what he was expecting. Maybe he'd see her again, and she'd explain everything. But stop after stop, she didn't appear. The day passed in a blur of routine, but the nagging feeling in the back of his mind grew stronger. By the third day, Alex started to wonder if he was obsessing over nothing. He resolved to let it go, convincing himself that life was too short to chase after mysteries that probably didn't exist. Yet fate had a way of pulling him back in. It was Friday evening, and Alex was on his way home when he spotted her. She was across the street, standing near a cafe, her hand resting on her belly as she looked through the window. Alex's heart raced. Without thinking, he crossed the street, weaving through the crowd until he was just a few feet away. "Excuse me," he said hesitantly, his voice carrying over the noise of the bustling street. The woman turned, her eyes widening in recognition. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. "Hi," she said softly, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "I don't mean to bother you," Alex began, choosing his words carefully. "But I've been thinking about what you said on the bus. You asked if you knew me, and it's been stuck in my head." "Do you?" "Know me, I mean." The woman hesitated, glancing around as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Finally, she nodded toward the cafe. "Would you mind sitting down for a minute? I think it's easier if we talk." Alex followed her inside, his mind buzzing with questions. They found a quiet corner table, and the woman sighed as she settled into the chair. For the first time, Alex noticed the faint lines of worry etched on her face, the tiredness in her eyes. "I didn't think I'd see you again," she admitted, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "But maybe this is for the best." "See me again? So you do know me?" Alex pressed gently. She nodded slowly. "Not exactly. I don't know you personally, but I know of you." The cryptic response only deepened Alex's confusion. What does that mean? The woman took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to the table. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but I feel like I owe it to you. I've seen your picture before, your face. It was in a file. A private file I probably wasn't supposed to look at." Alex blinked, caught off guard. A file? What kind of file? Her hesitation was palpable, and she seemed to be choosing her words with extreme caution. "I used to work for an organization," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's just say they dealt with sensitive information about people. I can't go into too much detail, but your name and photo were part of something I came across." Alex leaned back in his chair, his pulse quickening. What kind of information? Why would they have anything on me? That night, Alex lay awake, staring at the ceiling as his thoughts spiraled. What if there was more to his past than he knew? His childhood had been normal enough. His parents were loving, if a little strict, and his younger sister was his best friend growing up. They'd moved around a lot because of his dad's job, but nothing about his life had ever felt out of the ordinary. Still, the idea that something might have been kept from him nagged at the edges of his mind. The next morning, Alex decided he couldn't ignore it any longer. If there was a file with his name and photo, he needed to know why. But where would he even start? The woman hadn't given him any concrete leads, and he had no way of contacting her. As he mulled over his options, a thought struck him. His dad used to work in security, a field shrouded in enough secrecy that even as a kid, Alex hadn't fully understood what he did. Could there be a connection? Over the weekend, Alex called his parents under the guise of catching up. He tried to keep the conversation light, but his mind raced as he searched for a way to bring up his dad's old job without raising suspicion. "So, Dad," Alex said casually, "I was thinking about when we used to move all the time. That was because of your job, right?" His dad chuckled on the other end of the line. "Yeah, those were the days. I was always getting reassigned. Made life interesting though, didn't it?" "Sure," Alex replied. "But I never really understood what you did. You used to say it was security, but that could mean a lot of things." There was a pause, and Alex could almost hear his dad choosing his words. "It was just corporate security," he said finally. "Nothing too exciting. Why the sudden interest?" Alex hesitated. He didn't want to tip his hand just yet. "I don't know. I guess I've been thinking about the past lately, trying to piece together how everything fit." "Well, if you ever want the full rundown, I've got plenty of stories," his dad said, his tone cheerful but slightly evasive. Alex let the subject drop, but the conversation left him more certain than ever that there was something he didn't know. Over the next week, Alex threw himself into finding answers. He combed through his old belongings, searching for anything that might offer a clue. He even reached out to a tech-savvy colleague at work, asking if it was possible to look up someone's name in obscure databases. Though his colleague agreed to help, he warned Alex that privacy laws would make it tricky to uncover anything concrete. As days turned into weeks, Alex's frustration grew. He felt like he was chasing shadows, the mystery always just out of reach. Meanwhile, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was subtle at first. A car parked across the street for hours, the same figure lingering near his building on multiple occasions. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia, but the unease only grew. One evening, as Alex was walking home from work, he caught a glimpse of a man in a dark jacket following him. He quickened his pace, weaving through the crowded sidewalks and glancing over his shoulder every few steps. The man stayed close, his movements deliberate, but not overtly threatening. Alex's heart pounded as he turned down a side street, hoping to lose him in the maze of alleys. When he finally emerged onto a main road, the man was gone, but the experience left Alex shaken. He knew now that this wasn't just in his head. Something, or someone, was watching him, and the stakes were higher than he realized. That night, Alex confided in Marcus, who listened intently, his usual humor replaced by genuine concern. "This is getting serious, man," Marcus said. "You need to be careful. If someone's following you, they're not messing around." "I know," Alex replied, his voice heavy with frustration. "But I don't even know what I'm supposed to be careful about. I don't know what they want." "Maybe you should go to the police," Marcus suggested. Alex shook his head. "And tell them what?" "That a random woman from a bus said there's a file on me, and now I think someone's following me. They'll think I'm crazy." "Then what's the plan?" Marcus asked, his tone more serious than Alex had ever heard. Alex didn't have an answer. All he knew was that he couldn't stop digging, not now. Whatever was happening, whatever this file represented, it was bigger than he'd imagined. And the more he uncovered, the more dangerous it seemed to become. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and half-formed plans. Alex tried to focus on work, but his mind was elsewhere, his attention constantly pulled to the creeping sense of danger that had taken root in his life. Every shadow seemed suspicious, every unfamiliar face a potential threat. Marcus had tried to be supportive, even suggesting they install security cameras around their apartment, but Alex knew that wouldn't solve the problem. This wasn't just about physical safety. It was about unraveling a mystery that somehow made him its center. One night, after another exhausting day of dead ends, Alex received an email that made his heart stop. The subject line read, **, you need to know the truth. **, the sender's address was untraceable, a jumble of random letters and numbers. Against his better judgment, Alex clicked on it. The message inside was brief but chilling. *, stop asking questions. You're not ready for the answers. Walk away while you still can. Asterisk. Alex's hands trembled as he reread the email. It wasn't a threat. Not explicitly, but it felt like one. Someone knew he was digging, and they wanted him to stop. But who? And why? He forwarded the email to Marcus, who called almost immediately after reading it. "This is bad, man," Marcus said, his voice tense. "You've got to take this seriously. Whoever sent that isn't playing around." "I know," Alex replied, pacing the length of his living room. "But what am I supposed to do?" "Just drop it. Pretend none of this is happening." "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but you've got to be smart about this. If they know what you're up to, they're probably watching everything you do." The thought sent a chill down Alex's spine. He looked around his apartment, suddenly hyper-aware of how exposed he felt. The walls that once provided comfort now seemed like they were closing in. He hung up with Marcus and spent the rest of the night staring at his laptop, the cursor blinking on an empty search bar. He wanted to know the truth more than ever, but the warning in the email echoed in his mind. Despite the risk, Alex decided he couldn't stop. He felt like he was on the edge of something important, something that could change his understanding of his entire life. Over the next few days, he worked quietly, taking precautions to avoid drawing attention to himself. He used an encrypted browser, researched from public Wi-Fi, and avoided discussing his findings with anyone, even Marcus. His persistence paid off when he stumbled across a name. Asterisk, the Vesper Initiative, asterisk. It was buried in an obscure forum post, mentioned in passing as a shadowy organization, involved in data collection and manipulation. The post provided little concrete information, but Alex's gut told him it was connected to the woman's file. He scoured the internet for more, but every lead seemed to hit a dead end. Whatever this group was, they were careful to keep their activities out of the public eye. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. Late one night, as Alex scrolled through old articles about whistleblowers and corporate espionage, he came across a name that stopped him cold. Asterisk Richard Calloway, asterisk his father. The article, dated over 2 decades ago, described Richard as a former security contractor turned whistleblower. Someone who had leaked classified information about unethical practices within a major corporation. The article didn't go into detail about the nature of the leaks, but it mentioned a fallout so severe that Richard had been forced to change careers entirely. Alex stared at the screen, his heart pounding. His dad had never mentioned any of this. He had always described his job as mundane, even boring. But if this article was true, his father had been involved in something far more dangerous than Alex had ever imagined. And if the Vesper Initiative was connected to that part of his father's past, it might explain why Alex was now caught in their crosshairs. The next morning, Alex called his dad, his voice shaking as he confronted him. "Dad, I found something. An article about you, about what you used to do. Why didn't you ever tell me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Richard finally spoke, his voice was heavy with regret. "I was trying to protect you," he said. "There are things I did back then, things I exposed, that put our family at risk. I thought if I left it behind, we'd be safe. But I guess I was wrong." "What kind of risk?" Alex demanded. "Why would they be interested in me now?" Richard hesitated again, as if weighing how much to reveal. "The people I went up against, they don't forgive, and they don't forget. I thought they'd moved on, but if they found you, it means they're not done. Alex, you need to be careful. These people are powerful, and they don't play by the rules." "Dad, this is my life we're talking about," Alex said, frustration bubbling over. "I need answers. What did you expose? What are they after?" Richard sighed, the sound filled with years of pent-up guilt. "It was a long time ago. I uncovered evidence that the company I worked for was partnering with groups like the Vesper Initiative to collect personal data on a massive scale. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. People's lives were being destroyed, and I couldn't stay silent. But exposing them made me a target, and I guess now they're targeting you." The revelation left Alex reeling. His father's decision to blow the whistle had been noble, but it had come at a cost. a cost Alex was now paying. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard's response was grim. "You lay low. You stop digging. And you pray they lose interest. Because if they don't, Alex, I don't know if I can protect you." The conversation left Alex with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same. As he hung up the phone, he felt the weight of his father's words pressing down on him. The Vesper Initiative wasn't just some abstract threat. They were real, and they were watching him. That night, as Alex sat alone in his apartment, the tension reached a boiling point. A noise outside his window made him freeze, a faint but deliberate sound, like footsteps on the fire escape. His heart raced as he moved quietly to the window, peeking through the blinds. A figure stood in the shadows, barely visible in the dim light. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Whoever they weren't here by accident. They were here for him. Alex's chest tightened as he pressed himself against the wall beside the window, trying to control his breathing. He could hear his pulse pounding in his ears, the fear making every second feel like an eternity. The figure outside remained still, shrouded in the shadows, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were waiting. For what, he couldn't guess. He debated his next move, his mind racing through options that all seemed equally dangerous. Should he call the police, try to confront them, or stay hidden and hope they left? Before Alex could decide, his phone buzzed on the coffee table, the sudden vibration shattering the tense silence. He winced, cursing himself for not silencing it earlier. He glanced at the screen and froze. The caller ID was blocked. Against his better judgment, he answered, pressing the phone to his ear and whispering hello. A distorted voice came through, low and unnervingly calm. "You've gone too far, Alex. You were warned." Alex's grip tightened on the phone as he struggled to keep his voice steady. "Who is this? What do you want from me?" The voice ignored his question. "It's not just your risk anymore. Walk away now, or everyone you care about will pay the price." The line went dead before Alex could respond. He lowered the phone, his hands trembling. The threat wasn't vague anymore. It was personal. Whoever was behind this didn't just know about him. They knew about his family, his friends, his life. His thoughts immediately went to Marcus, and he grabbed his phone to call him. The call went straight to voicemail. Panic gripped him as he tried again, only to get the same result. He had to act. Whoever was outside his window wasn't there for show, and the warning was clear. They were escalating. Alex grabbed a flashlight and his phone and made his way to the fire escape as quietly as he could. His heart pounded as he swung open the window, the cold night air hitting his face. He shone the flashlight into the darkness, but the figure was gone. All that remained was a faint metallic creak, as the fire escape shifted under the weight of someone climbing down moments earlier. Alex leaned out, scanning the alley below, but it was empty. He pulled back inside, locking the window and double-checking every door and window in his apartment. He needed help, but who could he trust? His father's warning echoed in his mind. These people are powerful, and they don't play by the rules. If the Vesper Initiative was watching his every move, any attempt to involve the police or outside help might make things worse. As Alex tried to collect himself, his laptop chimed with a new email. His stomach twisted as he opened it, half expecting another cryptic threat. Instead, it was from an anonymous sender, but the subject line caught his attention. Asterisk, they won't stop. Here's what you need to know. Asterisk. The message inside was brief, but contained an attachment labeled Vesper Confidential. Against his better judgment, Alex opened it, his curiosity outweighing his fear. The file was a collection of documents, photos, and notes detailing the Vesper Initiative's operations. It revealed a sprawling network of surveillance, manipulation, and blackmail. What was most shocking, however, was a photo buried in the files, a grainy image of Alex, taken years ago at what looked like his high school graduation. Next to it was a detailed dossier about his life, from his childhood to his current job, complete with timestamps that suggested the tracking had been ongoing for over a decade. Alex's stomach churned as he scrolled through the information. Why would an organization like this take such an interest in him? The answer came in the final document, a list of names under the heading Liabilities. His name was there, along with his father's and several others. It didn't take long for Alex to piece it together. These were people tied to the whistleblowing incident all those years ago. The Vesper Initiative hadn't forgotten or forgiven. They were cleaning up loose ends, and Alex was next. Before he could process the implications, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. It read, "Asterisk, you've seen too much. Meet me at 47th and Pine in 1 hour. Come alone, or it's over. Asterisk." Alex stared at the message, his mind spinning. He had no idea who had sent it, whether it was a trap, a warning, or an offer of help. But he knew one thing: the Vesper Initiative wasn't going to stop until they got what they wanted. If he didn't take action, he would lose everything. The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. With no other choice, Alex grabbed his jacket and left his apartment, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. As he walked through the darkened streets toward the meeting point, every sound, every shadow felt like a potential threat. He didn't know who he was meeting, or what they wanted, but he was certain of one thing. He was about to come face to face with the truth, and it was going to change everything. The city streets were eerily quiet as Alex made his way to the meeting point at 47th and Pine. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of the unknown pressing on him like a suffocating fog. He clutched his phone tightly in one hand, his other buried in his pocket, gripping a small flashlight he'd grabbed on impulse. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it gave him a sliver of confidence as he approached a desolate corner. A single street lamp flickered overhead, casting long, shifting shadows that made the area feel even more ominous. Alex scanned his surroundings, his breath visible in the cold night air. At first, it seemed like no one was there, and for a fleeting moment, he wondered if this was all some elaborate game meant to toy with him. Then he noticed a figure leaning against a parked car just a few feet away. The person stepped forward, their face obscured by the hood of a dark jacket. Alex. The voice was familiar, but Alex couldn't place it immediately. The figure pulled back the hood, and Alex's heart dropped. It was Marcus. What are you doing here?" Alex stammered, his mind reeling. He hadn't told Marcus about the message, and yet here he was, at the exact location and time specified. "I was hoping you listened to the warnings," Marcus said, his tone calm but carrying an edge Alex hadn't heard before. "But you just couldn't stop digging, could you?" Alex stared at his best friend, trying to process the words. "What are you talking about? Are you the one who sent the messages? The threats?" Marcus sighed, his expression a mix of regret and frustration. "Not all of them. Some were from people higher up. People you should have taken seriously. I tried to steer you away from this, Alex. I really did. But now you've left me no choice." The truth hit Alex like a freight train. Marcus wasn't just a bystander in all of this. He was involved deeply. "You're working with them," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Vesper Initiative." Marcus nodded slowly. "It's not what you think," he said. "I didn't want it to come to this, but they don't give you options. They came to me years ago, back when I was struggling to make ends meet. They offered me a way out, a job, protection money. All I had to do was keep an eye on you. Make sure you didn't stumble into anything that could get you hurt." "Hurt?" Alex spat, his voice rising. "You mean killed? You've been spying on me this whole time, feeding them information about my life. And you think that's okay?" "It's not that simple," Marcus snapped, his calm demeanor cracking. "You don't understand the kind of people we're dealing with. They don't just ruin your life, they erase you. I thought I could keep you safe by cooperating. But when you started digging into your dad's past, they saw you as a threat. I tried to warn you, Alex. I tried to stop you without things getting to this point." Alex took a step back, his mind racing. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the betrayal cut too deep. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice shaking. "You're here to finish the job, aren't you? Marcus's face hardened. If I don't, someone else will. And they won't hesitate. They won't care about sparing you or anyone else in your life. At least this way, I can try to make it quick. Clean. Alex's chest tightened as he realized just how far gone his friend was. But before Marcus could make another move, a sharp voice rang out from the shadows. Drop it, Marcus. Both men turned to see a woman stepping into the light. It was the pregnant woman from the bus, except she didn't look vulnerable or frightened anymore. She carried herself with authority, her gaze steely as she trained a small, sleek handgun on Marcus. Who are you? Marcus demanded, his hands raised slightly. I'm someone who's been tracking the Vesper Initiative for years, she replied, her voice steady. And you've just made my job a whole lot easier. Alex blinked, trying to make sense of the situation. You're not just some random person. She shot him a quick glance, her expression softening briefly. I owe you for what you did on the bus, Alex. You didn't know it, but you saved my life that day. Now, I'm returning the favor. Marcus took a step back, his hands still raised. You think you can stop them? You have no idea what you're up against. The woman smirked. Oh, I know exactly what I'm up against, and unlike you, I'm not afraid to fight back. In the tense standoff, Alex felt like a spectator in his own life. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the picture they formed was more terrifying than he could have imagined. The woman gestured for Marcus to step away, a gun trained on him the entire time. He complied, but the look in his eyes promised that this wasn't over. As Marcus disappeared into the night, the woman turned to Alex. You're not safe here. Come with me. I'll explain everything. Alex hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to run in the opposite direction. But something about her tone, about the way she'd intervened at just the right moment, made him trust her. With no better options, he nodded and followed her into the shadows, leaving behind the life he thought he knew. But as they walked, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The Vesper Initiative was still out there, and now he was more entangled in their web than ever. He had escaped one danger, only to step into another. And somewhere deep down, he knew the worst was yet to come.